Dave.
Hey Scott, how you going?
Yeah, good. Really nice to meet you. We were just talking about the uh, joys of trying to get our Zooms to work. So I'm glad we're all sorted.
Definitely. Well, Scott, I wanted to say first of all, congratulations on the nut farm. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about where this journey first began for you.
Yeah, well, it's quite a long step back, actually. I mean, my last film was a movie called Don't Tell, which was a legal drama with Jack Thompson and Rachel Griffiths and Susie Porter and Jack McKenzie. Fantastic cast and a pretty, serious subject matter of dealing with, a true legal case of child sex abuse there at the Toowoomba Prep. And so after that film, which was quite a difficult film to make and research, that I thought I needed to go into something a bit lighter for a change. And so I reached out to Artie Lang, who's Arj Barker's manager, and I'd done a little comedy special with him years ago, and said, look, you got any comedians on your books who want to do a little low budget Aussie feature? And he said, oh, what about Arj? You like Arj? And I said, yeah, I love Arj. Arj has been one of my favourite all-time comics for a long time. And so that was probably talking about 5 years ago now, and so flew down, met Arj, and we sort of started working. He and his writing partner Sam, and all three of us started working on the script, and so it went from there, and had a lot of. Gosh, it's been a tough project, this one. We got hit with COVID and all sorts of, got up and fell over about 3 or 4 times, but eventually we persisted and ended up. I cut the budget right down into sort of probably about a third of what we needed, and worked every production trick I've ever learnt over my years in the filmmaking to get it done on its tiny budget.
So the idea for the film, there are so many different things that happen in this film. There's the macadamia nut farm, there's conspiracy theories, there's mad New Zealanders, there's so much going on. How did that all come together to form the plot in the first place?
Well, Arj had the original story idea of a crypto trader from San Francisco, which is where he's from, and then inheriting a macadamia nut farm, and then there were some evil New Zealanders. So the and the fracking thing was part of it. So I guess that was the bones of it. And then as you write, and as Sam and I did a lot of writing on this one, then we start developing ideas. And what about if we have them, tunneling from New Zealand, and what about this character and that character, and so we all just kind of. Layers upon layers of years of kind of writing and drafts, it all sort of new ideas pop in, some fall away, and there's still some great scenes that we would like to have shot, but we just couldn't afford them. So there's so many different versions of this script. It's a bit crazy, but I had been living in northern New South Wales at the time, and for a number of years, and there's some pretty wacky and interesting characters there, and I love the place, and so I wanted to bring all those oddball elements into it, and just have a bit of fun. It's certainly not a serious film by any stretch of the imagination, although there is an anti-fracking message which I'm pretty passionate about, that's found its way in there.
That sounds to be a little bit of a story in itself. There, you mentioned about there's different versions of this screenplay. How difficult was it to work out what to go with and what to cut out?
It's pretty challenging. I mean, we had it as I had it worked and written as a much bigger budget film, and then finding finance for Aussie films is pretty difficult. So and I've been doing this a long time. So you quickly go through the script and say, well, this scene serves this purpose, but we certainly can't afford that many casts, and we can't afford to shoot that location and any set designs and set builds. So let's rewrite that scene and into something simpler. So there was, it's the essential story is still the same, but I guess there's a lot of sort of film trickery in that what you can and can't show, and what you show to the audience. but yeah, there was an enormous amount of versions, and there always is in films, screenplays, especially when you get distributors and partners and funding bodies, everyone chipping in their ideas and what they think it needs to be. So it's gone through a lot of different versions, but we're happy how it came out, and the script in the end, I think, delivered the narrative on the resources we had available, which is pretty cool.
Like you said, the film touches on some really serious topics like fracking and even how tough it is to be a farmer in the Australian climate and things like that. How difficult was that to put that serious storyline into what is largely a comedic film?
Yeah, it is pretty difficult, and that's probably the bigger role being me as sort of the director and the producer and co-writer there in really making sure that was in there. After doing Don't Tell, I realised that sometimes messages are delivered up better when you've sprinkled them with sugar, and so making sure that was part of the narrative and part of the storyline there, and then that message sort of travels through, I think, was something really important to me. And and then having lived in that Northern Rivers region for a while, and just seeing the what that community did to stop fracking in and around the farmlands of Byron and all those beautiful areas down there in the Northern Rivers. They were very successful, and it was a push that people fought for many years and had some success to protect those communities. And so it was a really good thing to be able to then put that in a film in some way. And then also, basically my father grew up on farms, so I knew stories about how tough farming life was. And then even talking to the farmers involved that let us use the macadamia nut farm, how difficult it is to be a farmer in Australia, and with fluctuating prices of the produce and things. And but it's an important thing. It's been an important part of our history and our agricultural history, and will continue to be that way. So I think it's important that we look after our lands and not sell them off to big multinationals and anyone else, foreign ownership that's not looking at Australia in its best interest.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned before about your last film, Don't Tell, being it's a great hard-hitting film. Where did your love for comedy come from? Was comedy something that you always wanted to tackle in your film career, or was it just like you said, after doing such a hard-hitting film, you wanted to do something a little bit lighter?
Yeah, well, I've just been a lover of films for a very long time, and been doing this since I've left high school and film school and things. But my first graduate film out of high school was a little comedy, and then I've done other short film comedies that have kind of won awards at festivals and things like that. So it's sort of an area that I really enjoy, and I'm just a huge fan of growing up of the comedies of the 80s, where I was a kid and you're watching Eddie Murphy and National Lampoons and all sorts of a lot of those Bill Murray comedies. So, and I used to just watch them over and over again. So I've just been a huge fan of comedy, and also when you're doing a little film in Australia, a lot of filmmakers, when you don't have a huge production budget, you gravitate to a genre picture like a horror movie or a vampire film, or and a lot of filmmakers have done that as a way to get their films up. So I'm not really a fan of those genres, to be honest, and I don't really watch many horror or sort of movies. So the only other thing I could think of to do was a little kind of comedy that has the same elements as those sorts of productions, but it was something that I was a fan of. So that's sort of how my interest in this project really came about, and I love doing it. Love working with actors like Arj and John O. Roberts, and the on-set vibe is so much fun, and people are just trying to find new little angles to the characters and stories, and it's pretty great fun.
Definitely. Now, I'll get to the cast in just a moment, but your film the other day when we had the screening here in Melbourne led to a really interesting discussion in the foyer afterwards, and that was, in Australia, we do comedy very, very well. We've got great comedians, we've got great comedic talent. Some people would argue that the greatest Australian film of all time is The Castle, a comedy. Yet we seem to do so few these days. As a filmmaker who's now done a comedy, why do you think that here in Australia we do great comedies, but we don't do very many?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I was surprised at the how difficult it was to get a comedy up in the industry in the current state. And having gone through that, I can pretty much say it's partly because when you're pitching a film to distributors and the screen agencies, they're very reluctant to back Australian comedies, and they're reluctant because they think they're, I've a lot had, some of the top distributors in the country I've spoken to and pitched this script to, and they passed on it, saying, look, comedy is the most difficult genre to do, and it's too risky for us to get involved with. So I think it comes down to a financial risk that a lot of them just aren't willing to take. Even though, interestingly enough, all of our hit films, and the most memorable ones, from The Castle to Muriel's Wedding, and in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, they're all comedies, and that's what Australians do really well. And so I was very surprised at the pushback I had on trying to get comedies, just because everyone's very risk averse in the film industry, and same with funding bodies. They were not sure about the taking on a comedy. I think they find it easy just to do a straight drama where they can read the script and generally know how it may or may not work. So I think that's where the challenge is with comedy, which is something that surprised me as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, your cast, you mentioned your cast before. You've got an absolutely amazing cast here. What was that like, building this cast around Aj Barker? Because there are so many people in this film that do really, really amazing jobs with their work. You mentioned Jono Roberts before, but there's also Madeline, who does a great job. Guyton does a great job. What was that like, building that cast around Aj?
Yeah, it was an interesting process and an important one. I come from a bit of an acting background. I've sort of studied acting in the States a bit, and so performance for me as a director is the most important thing. And so I work a lot with actors on set and trying to find moments, because the thing that I am very confident with, but I'm also really love the process. So we knew that, and I knew the Zoran character needed to be a really big, solid performance, and someone of Jono Roberts' caliber, having done Broadway and been doing some fantastic theatre in the US for the last 20 years, and he was amazing. He was a real anchor point for it. This was Aj's first film, and he's not an experienced actor, and he'll be the first to tell you that. So it really helps when you surround yourself with those that are. And so Madeline's, incredibly experienced actor, and Jono Roberts and Guyton Grantley I've known since my film school days. I was at film school at QUT, and he was at the drama department, so we were making short films and things then. So I've known him for years, and we've done probably 4 projects together now. So that was an easy cast to make. That one, there was more of a phone call than anything. And and Terry Moros plays the legendary character of Dennis DeNuno in The Castle. He was just the perfect Harry, I thought. And you can't forget Roy Billing, a legend of Australian cinema. They were so great to work with. They were so much fun and so supportive, which is, you kind of need that from your cast when your budgets are low. And everyone was just all in, and they gave me all their best in the time, and it just makes the whole process manageable when you don't have a huge amount of resources.
I was going to say that. You said Aj doesn't have that much experience as an actor. He's got 2 of Australia's greatest actors of all time, in Tyrrell and also Roy, in there. How much advice was he able to get from those that were around him that have been doing this for like 30, 40 years now?
I think Aj didn't... he'd be better to ask that question of, but I remember him saying, gosh, after the first week of shooting. He said, I've done more acting in the last few days than I've done my whole career previously. Although, you know, he did play the character of Dave on Flight of the Conchords and very well, but that was a whole different role, that one. But when he got to set, Arj was, you know, a complete professional and just really started asking everyone questions and soaked it up like a sponge. I think he threw himself right into the part, which was great to see him when you're on set and you see him really, really committing to it. Then you know it's gonna come out okay. It's quite a relief as a producer and also as a director.
Now we should also probably mention Steph Tisdale, because she steals every scene that she's in. How did you go about that casting decision? Because there's so many roles in this where you think if the person in this role hadn't delivered, the film would have fallen apart, and that would have been tough for you as a director looking for casting. But where did people like Steph come from as well?
I have a good casting director in Ben Parkinson, and I've worked with him many times over the years, and we always work collaboratively to throw ideas around and pin headshots up and test them. And as soon as I saw Steph's test, there was an important part, that the Sergeant Blake character, and it was quite difficult to find someone. When you see someone's test from Steph Tisdale come through straight away, you just know she's a fantastic stand-up performer, but she's got that magic as a performer on screen that she just becomes so watchable. And you know, and a lot of even great actors just are good at their technique and they just don't have that magic. And some people just, you know, I think it's this X factor that people like Steph has. So as soon as you were filming with her, you just knew that you couldn't take your eyes off her. She's fantastic, and I do agree she steals pretty much every scene she's in. She can't help it, and she's just so watchable.
Definitely. Now, Scott, to finish off, what would you like to say to people out there who are about to head into cinemas to check out The Nut Farm?
Support Aussie films. If you don't support them and don't come early in on the sessions in the first week or so, you know, the cinema owners, you know, cut us from the screenings and replace us with a big US blockbuster with probably superheroes that you've seen 1,000 times. So go back and check out The Nut Farm and see some Aussie films similar to the ones you hopefully used to remember and love when you were from years ago.